The name of this panel is Wither Search, but that's a little deceiving because I don't think search is going to wither. I think search is going to explode. But I think they wanted a controversial title, so they went with that. But let's get right into my presentation. Let's see. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you about a range of things that are on my mind, from advertising to Twitter to Facebook, the depression, recession, financial apocalypse, etc., riots, and just what's going on in the world, and our world specifically. Once every 100 years, media changes. Everybody remembers this quote from about a year and a half ago. Facebook is going to change the world. Advertising will never be the same again. And anybody from Facebook here? Is Zuck here? Good. Trash. So anyway, Facebook is obviously going to change the world. And a year and a half ago, I think Zuck said this. And I don't know if you've seen the advertising on Facebook. But they've actually gotten to the point where their advertising is the advertising which Google will not run. Social media is not a good medium for advertising. It's the worst medium for advertising. It is never going to work. It's not going to work. It hasn't worked for chat rooms. It didn't work for message boards. It doesn't work for AIM. It's not working on... Pick the area where people are socially interacting. Does everybody remember when AIM was going to be the big advertising platform? You got pitched on that one, or message boards or chats. It just doesn't work. What does work is search. Search advertising. And it wasn't even Google's real invention. Google bought a company called Applied Semantics right here in Santa Monica. And this is Gil, who was one of the founders and a brilliant guy. They actually created the greatest advertising vehicle ever created in the history of mankind, in my estimation, which of course is search. And it's incredibly simple to look at it. And when you type in Toyota Prius in Santa Monica, and you get Toyota of Santa Monica, and then the Prius, and then Toyota of Santa Monica again, and then some other Craigslist ads and whatnot. Very simple. But it is the most effective advertising vehicle ever created, and it's just getting started. It's going to get better. And so when you think about these as analogies, and we use analogies to try to understand the things we don't understand, Facebook and social networks are essentially parties. And parties are the time when you are least receptive to advertising. The person on the left here is not advertising Trojan as much as he's advertising himself unsuccessfully. That's a Creative Commons photo, by the way, so it's okay for me to put it up there. People don't want marketing messages in social networks. Just like they don't want marketing messages when they're having a dinner party. The metaphor doesn't work. I'm sorry to the folks from the social media companies in the audience. Social media is fantastic at collecting data, behavioral stuff, that you can then use at some other point. However, it's greatly overstated. The fact is, behavioral data doesn't really matter that much. It's great that you know somebody's age. It's great that you know that they visited a car site. Yes, it's all great stuff. But what matters most is what cognitive mindset people are in at the time when they see your advertisement. And if your cognitive mindset is this gentleman's, or the woman rolling her eyes, or these people in Tokyo having a blogger dinner party, they're not receptive. But when it's the advertisement from Google in search, the metaphor is pretty obvious. You're researching. You're looking for information. You want a phone book, but not exactly. Or a phone book and a magazine, but not exactly. But it's still incredibly powerful. Search is just getting started. And don't cry for it. It's the entire internet industry is going to get a major boost from this economic turmoil we're in. That's exactly what happened the last time. How many people were in the Web 1.0 industry? Anybody here from Web 1.0? Great, almost two-thirds. Some young people in the room. What happened? We had a pretty bad year for 2001, 2002, and then what happened? Everybody moved to measurable. It came right back. And I'll show you that in a second. Here is the most compelling slide for everybody who's a marketer on the internet or a publisher on the internet. This is the gap between the amount of time people are spending online, and consumers, and the advertising dollars spent online. that gap will close. To think that the online industry, the internet industry, has any problem with monetization over the next couple of years is like thinking that settlers had some kind of problem with real estate in the United States before we crossed the Mississippi. We're just getting started. There is massive amounts of gold for us yet to reach, but what this gap shows is either incompetence on our part, incompetence on the advertisers and marketers' part, or perhaps we're a little bit slow, and maybe we're not as aggressive with the users. It's probably a combination of those things. Internet companies have a very weird view of marketing. They actually don't want marketing to exist to a certain extent. Most internet people, most of the granola folks from San Francisco, I'm from New York originally and Los Angeles for the last couple of years, the San Francisco folks are kind of anti-establishment. They don't actually want advertising to exist, yet they want to have these big businesses. So that's what you're seeing in that gap, in my estimation, is they don't like disruptive advertising. They don't like advertisements that users actually look at. We're going to get to that in a little bit. This is from Mary Meeker's yearly report from Morgan Stanley. And what you see there in that little circle is the 2000-2001 time frame, where we had a couple of flat quarters, followed by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 down quarters, and then ramping right back up. And that's exactly what we have now. Unfortunately, in this post, you're only seeing 2 of them. We'll probably have 5, 6, 7 down months, 3, 4 flat months. It's going to be a year of slogging through this. But if you make it to 2010, it's going to get a lot better. And the people who put the time in now are going to reap the benefits. The people who really provide true value for advertisers. And it's during a crisis like that you can take market share. Now is the time for new media to give the knockout blow to traditional media. Now is the time that we can take them out. They're suffering, they're fat, and they're slow. They like big offices, they like inefficiency, and they like their monopolies. That's why newspaper businesses are getting crushed. And it's, anybody here from the newspaper industry, raise your hand nice and tall. Okay, I'm sorry. We have 2 people who have their resumes with them, right? Somebody hire them, please. They're probably really good. Newspaper salespeople and marketers are excellent marketers. Just like radio people.
We used to be newspaper people.
Oh, used to be newspapers. That's why we're
That's why we're here.
Sucks to be the newspaper. But anyway, gosh, the newspaper business didn't see this coming, did they? I mean, the newspapers were reporting on their own demise for a decade.
Yep.
And they still couldn't change it. It would be as if you were, like the Titanic, and you haven't even left the port yet. And they're like, by the way, there's a lot of icebergs to the north. Okay, thanks. But you're like a day out, they're like, icebergs are still there. They're like, full speed ahead to the icebergs as quick as possible. They did nothing. They deserve to die. Don't cry for newspapers. It's great that they go out of business because new things can take their place that are better, much better. Engadget, Leo Laporte doing This Week in Tech, many different blogs out there and news sources, Dig. These are innovative and great products. Don't cry for journalism. Rejoice because a new journalism is being built today as we speak. And it's going to be better than the last one. It's going to be more qualified people. Yes, there's going to be some bumps in the road. Oh, who's going to write the 8,000-word article about, this story that nobody cares about or that 1% of the population cares about? Yes, it's going to be a little bumpy, but we'll get that stuff done. And the people who are the subjects, how many people have ever been quoted in the Wall Street Journal or New York Times? Raise your hand nice and high. And now, how many people you felt you were accurately represented? Raise your hand. Exactly. Almost none of you rose your hand. They screw up their stories all the time, and they make them into what they want them to be. They take your words and they spin it. How many people have had a journalist call them and say, here's my story, and here's my angle. Can you give me facts that back up my angle? How many people have gotten that phone call? Or, request from a friend. I have a journalist friend who's writing a story. He needs examples of bloggers who have done X. It's like, well, that's not how journalism is supposed to work. You're supposed to go knock on the doors, you're supposed to ask some questions, and then write the story. They deserve to go away. Goodbye, good riddance.